if we are going to break through ceilings, then we've got to become more efficient, more organized, and we've got to use those systemized approaches and the organization to leverage, which helps us really organize our process and climb to a higher altitude. How old are you going to be before you start to experience life like you want it? I want to tell you right now, whether you like it or not, there is a better way to do business. Hi everyone, welcome to the Business for Builders podcast. Welcome to you if you're in YouTube land. My name's Max. I'm the CEO at Smith & Sons Remodeling Experts here in Canada. It's great to have you in the show, on the show, at the show. But anyway, look, true to form, bit of housekeeping, like, share, subscribe, hit the bell, ding. And certainly if you want to make contact with me and you got some questions, please just keep it one question per email because there's a bit of a backlog. But certainly would love to get back to you, max@businessforbuilders.ca, or you can go to the contact form on the Business for Builders webpage, businessforbuilders.ca, and you'll get me there as well. Alternatively, you could shoot me a text on 250-241-8866, and I'm sure that number will be in the screen somewhere. Unfortunately, if you're in the podcast, you're going to have to rewind that and go again. All right, so as usual, want to bring some value. What's today? It's Tuesday. Had a cracking week last week. Yesterday, we got out the gate pretty strong. Always something to do. We had a great time on Friday with the live Q&A. We did over 90 minutes just rapid fire on talking to general contractors and, answering questions as best we can. And, got a great follow-up email from a fella in Ontario. Thanks for doing that, Josh, if you're listening. And, it was quite an extensive email that he sent. But, hopefully I was able to help out there with a response. So, true to form, we are wanting something. We basically want to deliver to the community something they can literally take away with them, or at least take away and think about perhaps, and just really look at whether or not it's applicable to their situation, whether or not they can use it. But certainly, today is not going to be no different. I've been given some strict orders to try and keep these episodes a lot lower, a lot less time, and I've got a page of notes again here for some reason. But I just really want to make sure that it's worth your while. If you're going to hang with me for the best part of 30 minutes or more, then I really want you to get some really good steak and potatoes out of this that's really going to help you build your business. So really today, I think we're going to use the heading, what you don't measure, you can't manage. So in other words, unless you've got eyeballs on it and you're monitoring that process, it's impossible to make changes or manage because you don't know what's going on. So as a bit of a side note, I want to talk, the reason that I'm going to talk about this is because a couple of things which I think general contractors struggle with is breaking through ceilings and organizing their position, their situation. I think when I see, I've got, just because I'm a carpenter by trade, I've got an enclosed builder's trailer at home and it's all deckled up with smithies and whatnot. And, I like, trailers where I walk into. And matter of fact, I would spend a bit of time, funny enough, on Pinterest getting ideas about storage systems for enclosed trailers. I've got a 12 by 6 by 6, barn doors at the back and a side man door. And, I wanted to look at the ways I could efficiently store that, because really it's about making sure that I could eyeball where things were, not back in their place. So, everything had a place. And there was a place for everything. So I think in our business, we need to, if we are going to break through ceilings, then we've got to become more efficient, more organized, and we've got to use those systemized approaches and the organization to leverage, which helps us really, organize our process and climb to a higher altitude. So, I think a lot of the work, we often say that we're building this, Smith & Sons plane as we go down the runway a little bit. But I think what the hardest thing you'll ever do is to hit altitude where there's a cruising speed, where, life is a lot easier. And it just takes a lot of work. And, an aircraft will probably use a lot more gas trying to climb to an altitude than what it will once it sits on that cruise altitude. And so, for us as business operators, guys and girls running general contracting businesses, we've got what we're all trying to do is find our way to that level that we're satisfied with, that is a cruising speed by which we can, maybe start to enjoy life. We can, the business then starts to give back to us in the way of a dividend. It starts to free our time up a little bit. It gives us something to be proud of, all of those kinds of things, right? So, when I'm talking about measuring and managing, that's a better way of putting it because I can remember that a little bit easier. When we're talking about, measuring and then managing off the back of those measurements, really some of the areas that I quickly put down here is marketing, leads, and of course, finances. And so the first two I'm not going to do a deep dive into because that could end up being a single podcast by itself. But, in the areas of marketing, when we're talking about, all right, so what are we measuring, and then how are we managing that? It's I think there's a couple of ways you can market. Obviously, you can do digital, which we do a lot of here at Smith & Sons. And of course, we occasionally entertain the traditional type marketing process like print media and letterbox drops. And, our operators get, what we call we're remodeling in your area brochures that they can give out to all of the neighbours in and around a project that they're doing, just to express to the neighbours that we will act responsibly. We won't have barking dogs. There won't be mess left everywhere. So some of those traditional mechanisms we still do, no problem. But when I'm talking about measuring and managing, the digital side of things really enables us to watch the behavior of our audience or our marketplace to figure out what is resonating and what's working. So essentially that is a lot of measuring goes on. And then off the back of that measuring, we then, make calls as to which way we go. We do a lot of A/B testing, different copy, different videos. Do we do slides? Do we do carousels? Like all of those kinds of things. They're always, and literally only this morning did we talk about how that, some of the marketing that we're doing. We get a sense that we're kind of it's growing a little bit stale. So we've got to make some adjustments and things like that. So no longer do we have to just sit there and guess. And really when it comes to print media, which is, really digital's come out of, traditional print. It's just a different marketing method. I don't know if it's better. I think it's more affordable. I've looked into newspapers and radios and billboards and things like that. And they're all very expensive because traditionally they've been sold to the upper echelons of business. So for us as let's say small business or small to medium enterprise, we actually double down on things like Google AdWords and digital because it is actually it's more affordable. There's no question, but you can still spend significant amounts of money. I know that we've probably spent over $70,000 on Google AdWords just this year, and it's 4th of October. And so the thing we love about digital is that we can measure. Okay, we can measure clicks and impressions and CTR or click-through ratios. So it really does give us some insight as to how we can improve and, where we should maybe spend some more money, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we do in, the marketing world. And of course, once you get the phone ringing, that brings me to my next point, which is leads. How do we go about measuring and managing leads? Well, what I would urge, everybody to do is, first of all, define your niche, what kind of work you need to do. What you need to do then is really, sort out the value of your average contracts. Some guys in my organization, they don't really want to, deal with $350,000, $500,000 projects. They're happy in the $50,000 to $100,000 kitchens and bathrooms and some of those more, manageable, ticket items. So it really does come down to, what sort of, what lead numbers that you need to do based off the size of the contracts that you're going to close, which is going to then create the gross profit amount per month or per year. And that's really going to give you an understanding of, what you need to produce. So a lot of guys just go, well, I'll throw an ad on Facebook or I'll go and put an ad in. And they've never really quantified what type of projects they're looking for. They haven't really got a documented sales process, which is, going to challenge you more because you're going to go out there every time and potentially do it differently, which is not cool. Because what we're trying to do with systems is create predictability and repetition. We kind of want the wash, rinse, and repeat process. And so the other thing is your conversion rate. So you're like, okay, I'm going to do $100,000, basement renovation. And out of that's going to create a gross profit, let's say, gross profit of say $30,000. And then my business needs $30,000 a month to run. Now you understand that $100,000 a month is not going to really, do it. So you just start to really get a feel for, what sort of dynamics within your business that you need to really accomplish to ensure that you maintain profitability. And here's the problem. You can't I guess knowledge and wisdom. I talked about that maybe in the last podcast, but you can't grow a business unless you've created profit, which essentially becomes operational capital, money that I can then reinvest in the business to grow the business. And so, you need to think about your conversion rates and what sort of money is going to be, made on those conversions. And that really then leads me to my next point. So I'm getting through these pretty quick. Finances is certainly another place where measuring and managing, are very important. So, I think when it comes down to working out what sort of contracts you want to do, you've got to understand what sort of profit margins are going to be built into those sorts of projects. Because if your business does cost you, let's say it costs you $10,000, a month to run, and you're invoicing for $50,000 a month, then, I would say at a 30% gross profit margin, you're making $15,000. So you're creating about $5,000 worth of what I'd call operational capital or gross profit. And just side note that if you are creating that sort of, profit, you're probably marking up by about 43% to create a 30% gross profit margin. And so, when we're talking about our fixed expenses and, how do they compare with our monthly claims? Well, we've got to make sure that we don't, if we don't invoice for enough on a monthly basis, understand that it's a very slippery slope. And this is why we take a lot of, I pay a lot of attention to percentage points. I pay a lot of attention to trajectories. Is over the quarter, is your business showing a negative trajectory or is it showing a positive trajectory? This is why what I'm doing is by analyzing this, essentially what I'm doing is I'm looking at the measurements and I'm figuring out what I've got to do next month, or what do I need to do with my marketing to improve my inquiry level? What do I got to do in the way of my costing and estimating? Am I not putting enough profit into jobs? Am I not including enough maybe cushions or contingencies because my last 3 jobs I've really blown my budgets? Now, understand just a bit of a caveat, that is that the business that we run in its entirety across the board, 99.9% of the time is fixed price contracts. So we're always looking at budgets. We're always doing back costing. We're always making sure that we've highlighted areas where we've estimated well or we've not estimated well. Certainly in the areas of where we've got an overage, where we've spent more money than we've actually budgeted for in the build cost, then we need to know how that happened and why that happened, and was there just a basic mistake, or was there a consistent oversight based on my ability or my inability to estimate and build the project in my head? That's always super important. So, when you're looking at your fixed expenses, and you've got to look at your monthly claims. A part of your monthly claims, you've got to look at your sales and your sales cycles. It's really discouraging when, I hear guys that have, maybe sold a large project for $100,000 or $250,000 or whatever, and all of a sudden they take their attention away from that, and they take their attention away from sales and they go into construction now. The problem is 6 to 9 months from now, or less, maybe 3 months, what you're going to find is you're going to be in a valley. So what we're trying to do by measuring and managing is we're trying to take the hills and valleys out and really create an evergreen business that has a lot more predictability built into it. And so when you're looking at monthly claims, it really has a lot to do with not just construction, although it's super important because we can't get to our claims or our progress payments or our stage claims unless we are moving ahead with construction. What we've also got to do simultaneously is to make sure that in 3 months' time that we're not going to hit a hollow or a valley whereby, because we quit doing sales 3 months ago, we now have no work to go on with. And so that's why it's not an option as to whether or not I run sales and construction simultaneously. It's an absolute must. You have to do it. And because what happens is, this is why we don't break through ceilings, because instead of having now you can have a positive trajectory, but understand it is going to be full of ups and downs. It's going to be very stock market looking as you grow. But when you take all of the tops and all the bottoms, what you're going to find is there's going to be a trend that is upward, and that's what we want to do. What we find is most guys, because they win jobs, stop marketing or stop selling, they then go ahead and build. What they do is just straight hills and valleys. It's hills and valleys. There is no trend. And if you're not careful and you're having a few bad months in sales, what you're going to find is your overheads or your fixed expenses or your running costs are going to exceed what your monthly claims are. And all of a sudden, you've got yourself in. And if you do that for several months or 3 months or a quarter, you're going to be able to see a negative trend. And if you're not measuring, then you're not going to know it's even coming. And I would call that a blind spot. That's going to end up being a blind side to you financially. And your accountant is going to be wonderful enough to tell you when you do your year-end books that, oh, by the way, Mr. or Mrs. General Contractor, you're losing money, or you're showing a negative net profit. You might show a 5% net profit, which means, the business is on its way out. So, you really do have to look at that. And of course, you've got to compare, like I started out saying, with the $50,000, when you got a $50,000 claim for that month, of that claim, only 30% is to be put towards your gross profit, and the 70% is got to be spent on paying cost of goods sold, subcontractors, vendors, suppliers, etc. So you've got to make sure that just because that $50,000 comes in, that doesn't all go to you. It should be earmarked appropriately, or the way it should be. That is that only 30% of that. If you're marking up by 43, if you're marking up by less than 43%. And probably on some renos, you should be marking up as high as 50%, depending on, what the project's about and how big it is. And you should be allocating the funds to be able to spend the money when when your bills come due. Understand that, particularly in renovation projects, it's all cash flow positive. You shouldn't be having a hard time paying your bills. If you are, it's because you're obviously over budget on your build cost, or you're taking too much money out of the company account. It'll probably be one of those two. And so you've got to make sure, and of course the other thing is, the fixed expenses. If you're way too top heavy, if you've got too many offsite expenses, then that's going to be really making it difficult for you to make a profit, even if you are marking up by 43, 45 or 50%. You really can't outsell stupidity, although sales does cure a lot. You've got to be focused on profit. Revenue is vanity. Profit is sanity. So look, one little side note, if you're saying, Max, I want to grow the business, and if you're not creating profit over and above you fixed expenses, paying your vendors and your subcontractors, and taking care of your monthly bills, if you're not put something aside in the way of profit, you're really just going around the mountain, and you're just going through year after year after year with the same old. What your goal is going to be is to put aside a couple of months, 3 or 4 months perhaps, of whatever your fixed expenses are. So let's say you and your business, so when you're pulling a salary or a wage that is what I would call industry standard, you're not overcooking it and taking too much money, and you're not short selling yourself and not taking enough money. But let's say you're at a market industry standard. If you're not, what you want to do is take that, let's call it $10,000 a month if you're a one-man operator. You want to make sure that you bank $30,000 or $40,000 that is just there for it's a safety mechanism. Because when you want to expand, let's say, and this is why I was chatting to to Josh on email the other day from Ontario, and he's wanting to put on a project manager, and he sort of sent me an email, and I responded the best way I could. And, I recommended in that email that if he's going to do it, he needs to create a bank of 3 to 4 months worth of overhead that includes the salary for that project manager. So he's given himself a little bit of space before he goes on the expansion warpath to make sure that he's created a little bit of a backstop for himself financially. So in the event that after, maybe 30 or 60 days it doesn't work out with the project manager, he hasn't gutted his situation financially, which essentially would then put so much more pressure on him as the operator because, he's now really, if he didn't put that bank aside, he would actually be in the red. And you really have a hard time selling yourself out to recover that amount of lost profit that you've just invested. So what I'm saying is you put the bank in place and you use that as your expansion war chest to go and invest in the expansion of your business. Don't, you just use that as a rule of thumb. Anyway, so that's enough about, what we measure. We're measuring how we go about marketing. And look, if you want to go and advertise the newspaper, that's fine. Make sure you ask every inquiry that comes in, hey, how'd you find out about us? And they say, well, I saw your ad in the newspaper. You're like, great. And that's as close as I can get to measuring a newspaper ad. How did you find out about us? That's going to be the only way that I can really get some feedback. And you know what? That's okay. A lot of the time they might see in the newspaper, they'll jump online, they'll check out your website, they'll hit a contact form, they'll come to you and they'll say they found us on Google. and it's like all of a sudden the data that we receive is not completely accurate. So look, I think, that's sort of where we're at. That's 20 minutes. I'm doing pretty darn good, maybe less. I'm wondering if there's any questions in TikTok. I'll be keen to get to those after this recording. Look, a couple of documents that we use to help our general contractors, just a few of them that I've made a list here, really that help our guys do that, measuring and managing process. There's a list here that I'll give you, and maybe it'll make sense to you, maybe it'll make no sense. I don't even know what that is. But first of all, there's the know your numbers, and that's a spreadsheet that basically helps them figure out what their personal costs are, to be able to work out what their income should be, and if that's a fair number or not. Maybe they've got to sell the pontoon boat or get rid of the jet ski, or maybe sell some real estate to try and lower their obligations per month financially. But essentially what we're looking for using that know your numbers spreadsheet is the break-even point, okay? We want to know what the business has to make just to keep me alive. That's super important. There's another document there which we've created, which has a bunch of metrics built into it as far as what I'd call a development pathway, or what was the other word, like revenue targets. And so year one, your revenue target might be 250,000. Well, as we extrapolate that data, we work on a 30% gross profit as a minimum. It'll then tell us, we'll be asked, okay, what's your average contract value? So you might say 50 grand. And then it'll say, well, based on and then it'll say, what's your conversion rate? And our conversion rate might be 25% of gross leads. And what it does is it extrapolates out, what if your average contract value is this and your conversion rate is this, it'll tell you that the inquiry value that needs to come in. And I'm not talking about inquiry numbers. We used to focus on inquiry numbers, but it was a very inaccurate metric. What we focused on now is the actual value. So if we have an inquiry for a kitchen, it'll be the estimated forecast build value for that kitchen will be about 75,000. Conversely, a bathroom might be between 25 and 35, so we might say 25,000. And so what we do is we start coming up with these numbers to help us work out what sort of work we want to do. And so what it will then tell me is, okay, if that's the inquiry value that I want, so essentially if you want to do $1 million in sales this year, I would be recommending that we get in excess of $4 million worth of inquiry. And what we then do is we know that 50% of those leads will go out the window. They'll either be a no-go, or they'll go onto a remarket list because they're not ready. They haven't got funds together, but we do want to keep them in our ecosystem, and we do electronic direct marketing to those types of clients. But out of that 50% that remains, what we find is it should be able to convert 50% of that 50%. So essentially that's 25%. So what we can do we can extrapolate the data, and that's a spreadsheet over 10 years. So each year you can see, okay, I'm going to step up from $50,000 jobs to I'm going to go for $100,000 jobs. And that doesn't mean you don't do $25,000 bathrooms. What I'm saying is the majority of the work that you want to do is going to be those bigger jobs. But you just got to be understanding that as you're in the expansion process, you yourself needs to be growing across all areas. You need to be able to understand your marketing. You've got to be more systemized. You've got to have a really competent attitude towards leadership and human resource management and things like that. So that's the sales target. So that's a 10-year forecast that we can do. A gross profit calculator, basically that helps us understand that, if we invoice for 50,000 and we are marking up by 43 as a minimum, we are taking a 30% gross profit margin percentage. And then it really helps us to understand when we put our fixed expenses side by side in that spreadsheet, we can actually see that, okay, if I only invoice for this much, say 50 grand, and my GP percentage is 30% of that claim, and my expenses are 20 grand, it'll tell me that I'm $5,000 in the red that month. And without even having to do any remarkable kind of accounting, you can tell that if you do that, for 3 months in a row, you got yourself into the hole. You've got to change it. Your business model's broken, right? Okay, so that's a gross profit calculator. Now, the other thing that we give them in a spreadsheet format, but it's actually what I would call an old school whiteboard setup, because I'm an old dude compared to some of the folks watching probably on TikTok. But I like the whiteboard side of things. It's something that I can get a visual on. I actually have one in the office because I am that old school. And essentially, it's a tracker. So I start monitoring, on a daily basis, how many leads came in, what's the value of those leads. That's what I'm more important. what leads what work, how much value do I need to quote on this month? What contracts have I signed this month? And what claims have I made this month? Now, if you don't like whiteboards, it's on a spreadsheet. That's what we do. You can build that. But it's very visual. I know some of my general contractors, they're not computer savvy. They put up with it because that's what they have to do in the business. But when I start mentioning whiteboards, they're like, yeah, I like that way better. And we are very, hands-on. If you've been in the trades and you've got yourself a trade and you've moved into being a general contractor, that'll resonate with you perhaps. And then the last document there that we use is a revenue target and over the lead forecast. So again, I talked about if I need to do $1 million in sales, I'm going to have $4 million. We've basically just created a spreadsheet so we can understand the guys that, let's say, want to do 500,000. Well, what I've got to do for that individual is get them $2 million worth of inquiry. And so this is where, when you join forces with Smith & Sons, we're doing a lot of measuring and managing in the background, and we're doing a lot of this document preparation, and we're doing a lot of this analysis to really not only just improve it for one general contractor, but we're actually taking the data from many general contractors, whereby we're improving our systems on a daily basis. And so, we're frontline working hard with our general contractors, and always wanting to make it better, more efficient, more profitable, and really do sharpen up everything that we do in and around the brand. And that's a lot of the benefit that the general contractors who are part of the Smith & Sons group benefit from. So in closing, look, one of the other things that we do, and I actually got this one printed out, it's a 4-page document, and it's a 100-point health checkup, that I recommend, my general contractors go through on a yearly, once a year at least, maybe beginning of the year, maybe at their year end, once they've got some of the good or bad news from their accountant. And it really is, things around, now we have design centers, in other words, offices where they might have a built-in mini showroom that, the customers can come in and talk about their projects. So, there's a bunch of points breakdown. So the breakdown real quick on the health checkup, and you can maybe go and Google something like this to be similar. In the design center of the office, there's about 10 points. We talk about vehicles and having decals, customer service. Do I return my phone calls promptly, like on the same day? We've got computer system usage. So we want to make sure that they're starting to get involved, using technology. And then it talks about, it's very specifically related to the franchisee. Do I wear a well-maintained uniform at all times? If you haven't got T-shirts, and caps and, something that has your brand on it, that's probably a mistake. Also, we talk about staff and how we are, managing our staff and our team, in the areas of salespeople, how do we go about presenting quotes, advertising and marketing, which obviously the digital side is handled by us, but the analog, let's call it the old school, press the flesh, pound the pavement, and really go out there and build networks. Are you doing that as an operator? And of course, we talk about, a growth or a franchise growth pathway. We talk about that in the business. And, talking about business plans and understanding our design, plan, construct methodology and things like that. And you get a total out of 100. 0 to 25, your condition is critical, unlikely to survive. 25 to 50, your condition is in decline, immediate attention needed. That's 25 to 50. 50 to 75, your condition is stable but vulnerable. 75 to 100, a long and healthy life is highly likely. So that's where we want our guys and gals to be, in the 75 to 100 zone. So that really does wrap up the whole, measure and manage. So we are, I never used to be a massive metrics, monkey. Okay. But I've grown to love the power in measuring, because it really does, what it does is it identifies our weak spots. And I know that if you're a general contractor, sitting here listening, on TikTok or watching this YouTube video or listen to me on podcast, you kind of would like to know where your blind spots are. Well, I'm telling you, until you start doing an audit on you and your business, you're really going to struggle. So hopefully I've been able to give you some insight, some things that are relevant to how you might go about measuring within your business and managing, and really doing a really close audit, which essentially is going to help you organize, your business trailer, if you like, to make sure we've got shelves and we've got drawers and we've got places to hang things up and everything Everything's got a place, and it's very organized. When you walk in there, you can put your hand on anything. You can see the performance. You know when something's missing. You know when something's broken. And what that's going to help you do, hopefully, is to break through the next level, or, break through the ceiling at least, and really give you a good, strong insight into how you can go about it. So I hope that's helped. Like I said, like and subscribe. Give us some love. We'd really appreciate it. Don't forget, you can contact me at max@businessforbuilders.ca. You can text me at 250-241-8866. Would love to get that. And go build a kick-ass business. See you on the next episode. Cheers.